Hello, this is Terrence McNally. Alex Preti is a martyr. His video-documented murder by ICE agents in the Trump administration's responses have evoked such universal condemnation that we are actually witnessing some slim signs of retreat on their part. The administration ran their usual playbook, lie immediately, blame the victim, and block a fair investigation. But when Attorney General Pam Bondi offered to remove ICE from Minnesota in exchange for the state's voter rolls and other sensitive citizen data, it was clear that the assault on the state has little to do with immigration and a lot to do with interfering in the 2026 elections. The White House has removed Greg Bovino from his role in charge of the Minnesota operation, shut down his social media account, and is reportedly reducing DHS forces in the state. It is horrific that it took another cruel and senseless death, but are we seeing the positive results of peaceful, principled, powerful, and relentless protest? Here's my 2002 conversation with SHARON SALZBERG, co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society, on her book Faith, Trusting Your Own Deepest Experience. SHARON is a New Yorker, and the book is her response to the experience of 9/11. Seems like it might be helpful in our current dark time. Where do we place our faith when the U.S. is beset by authoritarianism and the world by multiple wars and climate-driven disasters? Is faith today painfully naive or absolutely necessary in order to fight on? Hello, I'm Terry McNally. Thank you for joining us on Free Forum. Faith. It's been the subject of recent magazine cover stories and television documentaries. It's a word loaded with promise and controversy, the source of great comfort and painful disillusionment. No matter how comforting it might be, what is there to have faith in these days, when society is beset by terrorist threats, government abuses, corporate corruption, recession? We're living lives of rapid desperation, uncertainty, and accelerating change. Where do we place our faith in a world like that? Or is faith today naive? Or perhaps worse, a form of denial? What does faith mean to you? And what role does it play in your life? Here on Free Forum, we explore the lives, the work, and the ideas of individuals that I suspect hold pieces of the puzzle of a world that just might work. We look at new, innovative, and provocative models in business, environment, health, science, politics, media, all based on the fact that I believe we can do better, and I want to find out how. SHARON SALZBERG is one of America's leading spiritual teachers and writers. A contributing editor to O, the Oprah magazine, SHARON has been teaching meditation for almost 30 years and is the author of Loving Kindness, The Revolutionary Art of Happiness, and A Heart as Wide as the World, co-author with Joseph Goldstein of Insight Meditation, a step-by-step course on how to meditate. We'll touch on a lot of that, and we'll focus on her newest book, Faith, Trusting Your Own Deepest Experience. SHARON SALZBERG, it's my pleasure to welcome you today to Free Forum.
Thank you.
So, faith. My first question, as it always is on Free Forum, is what was your personal path to the work that you do today and the ideas that you're focused on today? And when I say that, I invite you to go back as far as you want. Child, really.
Way back.
And some people have ended up spending, most of the hour on that because it works. Childhood dreams, models, turning points, mentors. And so why meditation? Why writing? Why faith? All the way. You weave it, and I'll watch the clock.
Okay, great. Well, I had a very difficult childhood, a very painful childhood. My mother died when I was young, when I was 9. My father had already left. And a lot of the situation I found myself in really was that the pain and the difficulty and the torment were shrouded in a kind of silence. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And there was no vehicle really for my bringing my feelings out and my confusion, my pain, my uncertainty out. And so I think that's one of the ways I became interested in silence, all the different kinds of silence, the denying kind of silence that covers over and doesn't allow free expression, being silenced, in effect, and then the kind of silence that's liberating, that allows us to clear away the clouds of confusion and clutter, the things that normally distract us, and allow us to go deeper, the silence that allows us to go deeper and really see much more clearly. So that was a part of it. And also, I think, being in that kind of situation, as many children or adults know, one is always trying to see the deeper truth, because what is happening on the surface is not really resonant with what is happening inside, or in a family dynamic or something like that. And so I certainly did develop a tendency to try to look deeper and look deeper, like what really is the truth of this situation, all of which led to meditation.
Now, when you say the second one, because the first one makes very good sense, a child, sort of not talking about it, not knowing about it, and in an environment where no one is. The looking deeper, at what age did you find you were doing that?
I think it was funny, like in writing the book on faith, I looked back a lot because it is such a personal book, and I couldn't find a beginning point to that moment. When was I looking for the deeper truth? When was I trying to discern what was going on under the surface? But certainly by the time I went to college, which was when I was 16, I was looking for a way out of the suffering, and that led me right to meditation.
At what age?
I went to India when I was 18.
Ah. Yeah. That's quite a big deal. Now, one thing I'm going to ask you right in the middle of this, because we'll weave this story a little further. When you went to India at 18, how much was that a spiritual quest? How much was it, it was a good time to go to India, and somebody else went to Cambodia and somebody else went to Belize,
Well, for me, it was completely a spiritual quest. On the surface, what happened was I was going to school at the State University of New York at Buffalo, and they had a program where you could apply, you could create an independent study project, and then go off to another culture for a year. My joke is usually it being Buffalo, New York, many people went and not that many people came back, but I had, and that's where the faith comes in, I had a deep intuition that if I could only learn how to meditate, I could do something about the confusion and pain that I was experiencing inside. And I look back at that and I think, how did I know that? Why didn't I go into therapy, which would have been a very logical and reasonable thing to do? But something inside me said, if you learn how to meditate, you can put the pieces of your life together in a different way. And not only will there be some peace of mind, but there'll be some clarity of mind. Some of that tremendous confusion will go away. And so when the opportunity came through the school to actually create an independent study project, I created this project to go to India and study meditation. And off I went.
Wow. You're listening to Free Forum. I'm your host, Terry McNally, and speaking with SHARON SALZBERG, co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society and author of Loving Kindness and the just-published Faith, Trusting Your Own Deepest Experience. Okay, so you're 18. Your college sets it up that you can go and meditate. How, by the age of 18, and if you don't mind sort of telling us what year that was, I know we're in the ballpark together, but I'm a bit older. How likely was it that a 17 or 18-year-old even came to meditation?
Well, it was 1970 when I left, and it was something that I think when you talk about, did I go to India in effect because it was part of the times? It was part of the times. It was something that was in people's consciousness. It was a possibility. The world was full of possibility then in some way, and many people were going. What I couldn't find in this country at the time was somebody to really give me practical instruction, which is what I was looking for. I wasn't looking for a dogma or a set of beliefs or a new identification of myself as a Buddhist or anything like that.
Or even a guru.
Or even a guru. I wasn't looking for a devotional path, so to speak, but I was looking for a very practical set of techniques and tools that would help me transform my mind. And that's not to say that didn't exist here, but I couldn't find it. And so off I went to India.
How'd you get your first introduction to it, though?
To Buddhism?
To Buddhism or meditation.
As a student at the University of New York Buffalo, there was a course in Asian philosophy which I took.
Great.
And it had a Buddhism component, and it was a tremendous moment for me. There were many elements of it that were very striking, very important for me. One was, for one thing, given my background, the Buddha's comment about the amount of suffering, the degree of suffering that there is in existence in life, and that facing the truth of that is the acknowledgement of that is the beginning to the end of suffering. That you can't come to the end of suffering without acknowledging the degree and the intensity of suffering that does exist, and that was phenomenal for me, just to hear it spoken out loud and acknowledged in that way. And then there's another aspect of the Buddhist teaching which was very important, which was that no one seemed to be left out of his vision of possibility. You know, it wasn't that liberation or compassion or wisdom or a better life were for a select few, the lucky, you know, who are somewhere over there, and the rest of us were kind of on the sidelines, or
or
left out.
The chosen.
That's right.
As
That's
at
right.
least two of the most prominent religions in America.
Yeah. And I had spent much of my life up to that point feeling like I was on the sidelines, that I was left out, that I was excluded. Yeah, I was the unchosen, you know, very much so. And so, again and again. And so to have a path offered, to have a way, a vision of life offered that left no one out, where no one was excluded, where everybody was included, where every single person, no matter who they were, no matter what their background, no matter what they'd suffered, had the same potential. And that was acknowledged and fully spoken about. It was enormous for me.
It's even interesting, I'm thinking as you say that so many religions, or maybe I'm making a generalization, this isn't true, but I'm thinking of that the Buddha was a nobleman, right?
Yeah, and,
a prince. And some religions, the leading figure is not by any means, is an outsider and so on, and that a nobleman, a prince, would see it as inclusive.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. You've mentioned what is it? All life is suffering. Is that what's the term of the first? It's the first noble truth.
It's the first noble truth.
So I figure we might as well put out the four noble truths.
Right, sure. Maybe not so much that all life is suffering, but all life includes suffering, and that there's a cause to that suffering, there's an end to that suffering, and that there's a path to the end of that suffering. Those are the four noble truths. And
the path is meditation, or not necessarily?
Meditation is a component of it. The path is really about self-transformation. It's about living in a way that's consonant with the truth of interconnectedness, that our actions matter, that what we do matters, that we have to care about other beings, and our lives need to reflect that. And it's a path of going deep within and uncovering our great potential, learning how to nurture it, and learning how to bring it forth. So there are lots of different components to that, and meditation is key.
Okay. I'm going to ask you another piece of this that's very personal, which is that, you know, as you say, you lost both parents at quite a young age. Mm-hmm. So was there a religion in your life at that point at 17 or 18 when you discover meditation? And I think of... I know that there are even books and movies about the Christian family or the Jewish family whose child turns to the east, and they're what Mishigas is this, you know? In your case, were you freer to choose your own path because you were more on your own? And another question was, did you have siblings?
I didn't have siblings, no, and I was raised by my grandparents, my grandmother particularly, and I suppose I was freer because I was on my own. I did come from a Jewish background, and I wasn't, by the time I was in college, practicing very much. So at that point, my existence was pretty secular.
So you pick up the track again. So now you go to India, and you expect to be there a year for an independent study.
That's
How long were you there?
I was there for 3 years.
You know who tells a similar story is Wade Davis. Do you know Wade? He's a anthropologist and explorer in residence at National Geographic, and I think his junior year at Harvard, he followed, his anthropology thing and was gone for 4 or 5 years. Probably just about the same year you left.
That's probably right.
So you go there for a year, and then what happens?
Well, just before I left Buffalo, actually, it was interesting. A Tibetan Lama, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, came through Buffalo and gave a speech. And at the end of the speech, he asked for written questions. So I wrote out the question saying, I'm about to leave in a few days to go to India to study Buddhist meditation. Can you suggest where I should go? And this huge pile of paper was in front of him at the end, all these different questions. And, of course, it happens to be one of the first pieces of paper he picks out of the pile, and he reads it out loud, and he is silent for a moment, and then he says, I think you had perhaps best follow the pretense of accident. And that was it. There's no guidebook, no map, no, set of directories of great teachers to look for. Just, I think you had perhaps best follow the pretense of accident. And that's just what it was like. I went to India and went to one place and it didn't quite work.
His no guidance was actually guidance.
It was total guidance. It was very profound guidance. And I think what I learned from that, in retrospect, was that the power of one's intention is very important. That even though there were lots of missteps and mistakes and things didn't quite work, I just had to keep going. I had to keep honoring that initial intention, which was very strong.
And so what happened? I mean, give us a little bit. No, I want to hear a little bit of, because what we're picturing here is an 18-year-old from New York.
Yeah.
Who is taking the pretense of accident. So did you find a teacher? Did you settle in one place? Did you wander? And I know you ended up outside of India as well, in Burma for a time. So how did that happen? And then we'll move on.
I wandered through India for about 3 months. Because again, I wasn't interested in Buddhism per se as a doctrine. I was interested in very practical, intensive instruction. And so I couldn't quite find the situation. And then, life is just life. I'd find a great teacher without a translator or, someone who would travel.
I'm thinking in 3 months you could have found it in the U.S.,
Yeah, Buffalo even.
Probably. Willing to work for 3 months. Okay. So.
And then somebody suggested I go to an international yoga conference. I went there, and that was the low point of that conference was when the yogis and the swamis up on the stage were pushing and shoving each other to try to grab the mic to be the first one to speak. So that was very demoralizing. But somebody there at that conference mentioned they were on their way to Bodh Gaya, which is the town where the Buddha became enlightened, to do an intensive 10-day meditation retreat. And I thought, that sounds like what I'm looking for. So I went there.
And so was there instruction in that 10 days?
Yes, that was exactly what I was looking for.
So you not only found the place, but you found the instruction.
Yeah.
Okay, you're listening to Free Forum. I'm Terry McNally, and I'm speaking with Sharon Salzberg, co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society, which I see served a need that you were having trouble filling when you were young. It's very practical. And author of Loving Kindness and the just published Faith, Trusting Your Own Deepest Experience. And you can learn more at www.loving-kindness.org. Okay, so you have a 10-day thing with instruction, and so at that point, you've done your assignment.
Finished.
Write it up and go home.
No, I mean, it was difficult. The process of meditation in itself was quite difficult. It was challenging. A lot of the pain and the fear and the anguish I had held inside started to surface. And
in that 10-day period?
In that 10-day period, I started hastily pushing it away again, and it's a process. It is a tremendous learning process. And unlike many things that we insist on being instant gratification, meditation really is not. It takes time. In fact, you mentioned the Insight Meditation Society, which is the center I co-founded in Massachusetts. And soon after we began it, we received a letter which was quite remarkable for how it was addressed. Instead of being addressed to the Insight Meditation Society, it was addressed to the Instant Meditation Society, which I thought was all right. It's very
if only you thought of it,
Yeah, really.
You'd be rich today.
Then it'd be popular. But I could see that there was tremendous faith and conviction that this is what I needed to be doing. And at the same time, it was clear it wasn't going to happen overnight.
So you continued to study in India. And when did you go to Burma? Was it in the same trip?
I went to Burma more in the 80s.
I see.
When I left Asia in 74, I resettled back in the States, but always went back to Burma or Nepal or someplace to study.
Mm-hmm. And how is it that you were led to Burma or Nepal, or how? I mean, have you basically followed Rinpoche's guidance the whole?
Yes, I followed the pretense of accident. I mean, sometimes it's tremendously mysterious in many ways, one's spiritual life. Things aren't necessarily linear. It's not determined. You don't make a decision. Well, gee, I think today I'll go off and study with a Tibetan teacher. there are meetings, there are connections, there are relationships, and again, I think if one holds true to a very strong intention, then we will be led forth in the pretense of accident.
Yeah, as you said that, I thought of intention plus intuition.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the two of them together.
Yeah.
So, when did you start to write?
I started to write. My first book, Loving Kindness, came out in 1995, and most of my colleagues had written books beforehand, and people used to say to me all of the time, well, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book? And actually, it's interesting because as a child, I always wanted to be a writer. That was my dream. And I never did it. And then finally, I had been teaching this particular practice, this particular kind of meditation called Loving Kindness for so long that I did begin to write. And it's funny, if you look at the back of that book on the blurbs, people will say things like, Sharon Salzberg has finally given us the fruit of her 25 years of practice, or somebody said, we've waited a long time for this book. So it was a slow process.
Now, it's interesting. See, when I asked that, I thought you were going to say earlier. So I was so 95 is not that long ago at all. Yeah. So writing came fairly late.
Yeah.
How did it happen that you and your colleagues opened the Insight Meditation Center? And when was that? That was 76?
Yeah, we moved in 76, February of 76. We had been traveling, Joseph Goldstein, Jack Kornfield, and I had been traveling around the United States for a while, a year and a half or so, teaching these different retreats in a kind of haphazard fashion. Somebody would write us a letter and say, well, I can get together some friends and a cook. Will you come teach? And we would appear and we would teach. And at the end of that retreat, we never knew if there'd be another retreat until the next letter would arrive. And yet momentum began to build. And somebody finally suggested to us that we consider starting a center of our own. They said, for one thing, it would be like a sacred site in this country. It would be a repository of the very great energy that gets built up when people practice together. It wouldn't then be dispersed because we'd moved on. And so we began looking. And to the regret of many people, most of the interest at that time was on the East Coast. And we ended up in New England. So every winter somebody mentions that you couldn't have done Hawaii. You couldn't have done Santa Barbara.
And so the three of you started this center. Yeah. Now, you began, in a way, with a 10-day silent meditation. That kind of lengthy and rigorous thing is a big part of this, correct? Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a form. It's not the only way to start, and it's not the only way to continue either. The most important thing, really, in terms of a meditative point of view, is how one lives. It's bringing the meditation into one's life in terms of one's values and centeredness and sense of connection to yourself and to others. And so that's the most important thing. All of these other aspects are just tools to support that. And so for some people, doing an intensive retreat of that length is a phenomenal tool because, you can't give up just because you're discouraged. You're sitting in a room full of people far from home, usually. And so you work through a lot of things. And the environment's very supportive. It's very caring. So it's a wonderful tool. It's a wonderful means of pursuing one's practice. But the most important thing is the doing of it. In fact, one of my teachers once said, the most important moment of your meditation experience is the moment you sit down to do it.
Uh-huh.
Because right in that moment, you're saying something about caring about yourself. You're saying something about your values. You're saying something about your sense of possibility, which really is your faith. And so the fact that you sit down to do it is a tremendous thing.
That's interesting. I didn't begin meditating as early as I began doing yoga. But I do remember when I'd done yoga daily for about 6 months, and I actually was very lucky, and soon after I began, ran into an ashram and, and got, lots of instruction right off the bat. But I remember after I'd been doing it on my own for about 6 months that was the realization that I thought, wow, every day
that's right.
I do something that shows I care about myself.
That's right. Yeah, it's fun. It's great. Yeah. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Now, so you started the center, the three of you, and you've been teaching now, I think I said for 30 years. And you taught loving kindness, metta, for much of that time, yes?
Yeah.
The same very simple thing. What is it to teach something that in some sense seems so simple?
It's difficult, actually. I think we have a great yearning for complexity. We think somehow complexity is more interesting, is more profound than simplicity. And they say that sometimes when the Buddha himself was teaching, that he would speak so simply that even a 7-year-old could understand him. And perhaps partly as a result of that, it's also said he had many fully enlightened 7-year-old disciples. And sometimes what I think we all need to do is find that 7-year-old inside of us, which is willing to be simple and curious and open-hearted and open-eyed, about everything in life. And that's not so easy.
Yeah. And just before we move on, tell them just a little bit what the loving kindness meditation is, and let me share for myself. I suspect that many will be surprised at this particular practice, the metta, the loving kindness, because I myself, it's a meditation that I do, and I've actually sat with you one day doing it. I had associated Buddhism and mindfulness with loss of ego. Okay. And though it's not quite the same thing, I was pleasantly surprised when I encountered a meditation that started by encouraging me to love myself.
That's right.
I mean, that was the first thing. I went, oh, wait, I can be here, and I can, that can be like, that's meditation. Not only that, metta, and we'll let Sharon explain it better, but for me, it's the easiest for me to stick to because rather than just focusing on something as still and unchanging as my breath or a mantra, I find that metta is almost dynamic and participatory by comparison. And you explain it, and then I'll say, and then it'll be even clearer, I think, why it really works for a doer like me.
Well, I think one reason is that a practice like loving kindness forms the bridge between our internal spiritual work and our expression of it into the world. And it's a reminder that the work we do within is never for ourselves alone. It could never just be for ourselves. It's about joining the great interconnected fabric of life. And that's why perhaps, it resonates so much with you. And the practice of loving kindness, metta is the word in Pali, Pali being the language of the original Buddhist text, metta, and it literally translates as friendship. It means developing the art of friendship toward oneself, and that means all aspects of ourselves, not just the parts we like and we proudly present to the world, but also those parts of ourselves that are a little bit hidden from our view, or certainly the view of others, and those parts of ourselves we have a great deal of difficulty with or we might be afraid of. And ultimately it means the art of friendship toward all of life. It's the boundlessness of life, and it's a vision of life where we have a sense of complete belonging, because we all belong to one another, to life itself, and we have to take care of one another. My friend and colleague Robert Thurman in New York City has a wonderful and very New York City example where he says, imagine you're in a subway car and this group of Martians come and they zap the subway car so that you and the people in that car are going to be together forever. He said, what do you do? There's no way out. You are joined. You are together. And he said, if somebody is freaking out, you calm them down. You comfort them. If somebody's hungry, you feed them, because you are together forever. And in fact, that is the truth of things. And so that's the nature of metta practice. It's the recognition and the nurturing of that view of life. It's a very simple practice, as you say. We do it by repeating certain phrases, wishing well for ourselves and for others, and learning how to let go of distractions, of things that take us away from that primary intention, learning how to open our hearts and to be more present, to pay attention, in effect, in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, let me just share that for me, as taught by someone else, but as actually, I will say that the first contact I had with metta was from reading Loving Kindness. I was on vacation and took that book and began doing it from a book. It's that, and so I recommend, if this sounds appealing to you, and as someone who's a real, I'm an active mind person and a bit of a workaholic, that if this could work for me, it could work for anybody. That you hold first yourself, then someone who you would consider a benefactor, then someone who you just love. Often a child is wonderful for that. Then someone with whom, I'm not sure the order, is it difficult or neutral next?
Neutral.
Neutral. Someone neutral. The person who packed your stuff at Trader Joe's. Then someone who is difficult, or perhaps someone would even say an enemy, right? And then finally all beings. And with each of them, you wish them, as she said, you repeat these phrases, may you be first safe, may you be happy. So with each one of these entities, you go through and until I feel that I've really given them safety and really evoked for them happiness, then health, may you be healthy, may you be free, may you have ease of life, and then may you love yourself. And so for me, I go through those things, and it's like, I not only evoke all of those states, but I evoke my love for those people, and by the end of it, it's a wonderful feeling. And as I say, for me, easier than the kinds of meditations where it was simply pay attention to your breath.
Right.
So we're at the halfway point. You're listening to Freeform. I'm Terry McNally speaking with Sharon Salzberg, co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts and author of the book we were just talking about, Loving Kindness, which really explains metta and kind of looks at it from many different angles. And as I did, I read it as I began to practice, and I'd read a chapter and continue to practice and so on. And then the just published Faith, Trusting Your Own Deepest Experience. You can learn more at www.loving-kindness.org. Hello, this is Terrence McNally. You're listening to my 2002 conversation with Sharon Salzberg, co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society, on her book, Faith, Trusting Your Own Deepest Experience. Sharon is a New Yorker, and the book is her response to the experience of 9/11. Let's focus on faith for the rest of it. What do you mean by faith, and why did you write this book?
I think faith in the Buddhist tradition is the common translation of a word sada, which means offering our hearts. So what I mean by faith is the ability to step forward. It's a state of participation. It's a way of offering our hearts, of joining. I think the essence of faith is connection, being able to connect to ourselves and the truth of our present experience, being able to connect to a sense of possibility, no matter what's happening. I wrote the book because we live in very anxious times. First of all, of course, I started the book a long time ago. Times have gotten even more anxious, needless to say. And because I feel like the word is so confusing. In some way, I wanted to help redeem the word or reclaim the word. People think of faith often, and they think of, just adhering to a doctrine or a dogma. They think of faith as blind surrender, not being able to question. Often people think of faith as a very painful state, faith as a commodity that they were taught in childhood that you had to have the right kind or enough, or else you would be condemned, maybe forevermore. So in those cases, faith is either belief or even allegiance. That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And there was so much emotion swirling around the very word, and yet I felt, given my own experience, that there was a quality of faith that is none of those things. It's not adherence to a belief system. It's not allegiance to a doctrine. It's not an unquestioning, unthinking state, but it's something very vital, very alive, that could be liberating for us. And so I wanted to help people. I wanted to have the conversation about faith. I wanted to have people talking about faith and thinking about faith. And I think that's really why I wrote the book.
And I would imagine, since you continue to teach and you continue to have days here and there, have you had that conversation ongoing since you began the book? And is the book partly a your own journal, a report back from these conversations?
I think it is in a lot of ways. I continue to have the conversation. Of course, and as I said, times have changed. And, I think maybe we can't afford to be cynical anymore. We really need desperately almost to be looking for a deeper sense of meaning. And as you said in the beginning of the show, look at how much we've been disappointed or even betrayed by the people, the objects in which we've held faith.
Yes. In other words, it seems to me there's many meanings of faith. And obviously the capital F faith has often been associated with one's faith.
Right.
having faith, having a faith, that sort of thing. Well, this doesn't seem to be what you're exactly talking about. Then the small letter faith, I think, yeah, there's one which is, it seems the way you're kind of trying to, as you say, redeem it, which is faith as possibility, faith as trust. I noticed a lot, faith as trust, versus faith in those people, relying on institutions and entities who I think are doing a real good job of letting us down. You live in New York City. How did the terrorist attack of September 11th influence this book? At what stage in the book did it happen?
I had almost finished one draft when September 11th happened. I wasn't there. I live part-time in Massachusetts, part-time in New York City, and I was actually in Massachusetts en route to New York the morning of September 11th. I was just about to leave because I had a class that night, scheduled that night.
But you weren't flying from Logan, or you were?
I was driving. Yeah. Yeah. And I couldn't get in for another week or so because all the bridges and tunnels were closed. I got in, and I started teaching about 8 days later and stayed there till the end of October.
So you were teaching folks in the city of New York.
Oh yeah.
In the fall of 2001.
Yeah. Which was extremely profound. In terms of the book, it was amazing because the whole process of writing the book, many times I had to relearn faith in myself and faith in the importance of the conversation about faith. And because I think faith, as you were just saying, has to do with trust, but it also has to do with having a vision of life, like loving kindness does, in that when we have an ability to offer our hearts, we have an ability to move forward instead of withdraw. When we realize that we are a part of the whole of life, that's faith. And realizing that we are part of the whole of life seems to be the necessary understanding, I think, for us at this time. So in one way, I was even more inspired to write the book. On the other hand, I was in a state of great turmoil and despair myself. And my first thought was throw the book out. It was useless, that I had written it on the wrong level. The thought that kept coming to my mind was our metaphors have changed, and that the book was written on the wrong level. For example, I have the last chapter of the book is a story that was extremely important for me about the death of one of my teachers, a Tibetan teacher named Nyoshul Khenrinpoche that I was very, very close to. And after September 11th, I kept watching the thought come up in my mind, well, he got to die in bed.
And he was just one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought, wow, he got to die in bed. That's not so bad, But as time went on, and especially teaching in New York City, as I was, I felt more strongly than ever that what we needed was this conversation about faith. For one thing, the word was being used as really a synonym for fanaticism.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. Were the terrorists acting out of faith? And let me just say that faith, I would think, is essential for a suicide bomber. Some kind of, a certain kind of faith, or why would you take that action? Yeah,
well, in my effort to reclaim the word, I wouldn't call that faith. I would call that fanaticism. Certainly in a conventional use of the word faith, one might say that, and perhaps they did, but I would never say that. I would say that the kind of faith that I'm talking about anyway involves inclusivity rather than exclusivity. It involves joining in the fabric of life rather than pulling away and feeling separate. It means recognizing our oneness with all and not our differences, as being supreme.
Were those distinctions as clear to you prior to September 11th and people talking about fanaticism as faith?
I don't know if they were as clear to me. I think what happened was that I've always considered doubt as an intrinsic part of faith. I think faith is only strengthened by questioning and testing and probing, and I think we see, the results of a system that doesn't allow it when we see fanaticism.
Yeah, you're listening to Free Forum. I'm your host, Terry McNally, speaking with Sharon Salzberg. co-founder of Insight Meditation Society, author of Loving Kindness, which is a book on the metta practice, and the just published, which we're talking about now, Faith, Trusting Your Own Deepest Experience. And you can learn more at www.loving-kindness.org. This idea that you're talking about, that faith is inclusive, that faith is possibility, that faith is about connection. Are there some people that say, well, that's not faith? In other words, I almost wonder, have you had that reaction where they're saying, well, that's something else?
Well, Tricycle Magazine, which is a Buddhist journal, had a conference on Buddhism in America at the World Trade Center, interestingly enough, in the summer.
Wow.
And
Prior,
yeah. And so that was very poignant as well, having just been there, in effect. And I shared a keynote with Stephen Batchelor, who's a friend, Buddhist writer, who's written a book called Buddhism Without Beliefs. And so, in fact, I said to him, Stephen, how about if I talk about doubt and you talk about faith, just so we're not typecast? And he said, no, I'd rather not. So I spoke about faith and he spoke about doubt, which are very intertwined. As I said, I really don't think of doubt as being the opposite of faith. I think the opposite of faith is despair. It's just a very different thing.
Okay. Yeah, in other words, one of the questions that I had thought about, Sharon, was this one of, because you say that questioning is a part of faith, and that it's essential and it's consistent and so on. And I would wonder if most people, if they found them some questioning all the time, would think they lacked faith, would feel that they'd lost faith.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably true. When I was with Stephen at the conference, and he said to me, well, why don't you just say trust? The word faith is going to bring up so much reaction.
I have to say, as I looked at, even in a section where it was, faith will bring the ability to trust. Yeah. You say it a few times, and I had the same question, which is, why aren't you calling it trust?
Yeah. Well, I think I said at the time, well, that might be a little too easy. There's something in me that I don't know if it's some mischievous part, but I think the reaction is also part of our learning, to see the ways we relate to the word and the kind of associations it brings up and the dislike we might have. And because I think there's a richness in the word faith that strikes very, very deep when we come to understand it in a different way, which has to do with trusting our own deepest experience. And I think that's where the questioning comes in as well, that a faith that is just blind, is kind of, in Buddhism, as I say in the book, it's called bright faith. And it's the first stage of faith where it's like falling in love. We fall in love with a person who's a teacher or a sense of possibility, or even a place, a sacred site, that just enlarges our vision of who we could be. And it's this enormous rush. And it's so very pleasant that we might not want to threaten it in any way by questioning, by doubting, by examining. And in Buddhist teaching, bright faith is considered just the first phase of faith. It would
infatuation.
It's like infatuation, exactly. It would never be considered the final state.
Interesting, because when I think of the experience that I'm generalizing, but things I've heard, and certainly I was brought up Catholic, and then of course I've dealt with born again Christians and so on. That it seems to me what some of that might be, as I listen to you, is that moment of realization, that moment of initial faith, and then the idea to want to hold on to that.
That's right. That's right.
And that's what you're constantly going for. It's. I mean, I just say it's quite interesting what you're saying, because obviously if you use the metaphors you did of relationship, that in a relationship, if you think it's always going to feel,
That's right.
That's right. If you thought it was always going to feel like the moment you fell in love, you'd say, I must not love her. That's
right. Exactly. And so, one of the things, again, I appreciated about the Buddhist tradition is the emphasis on putting things into practice. The Buddha said, do not believe anything just because I say it. Put it into practice. See for yourself if it's true. And so following that moment of exhilarating intoxication or the infatuation, we have to put things into practice. We have to say, does this really make my life better? does this really serve my community? Does this really make a difference? And if we don't do that, then we're completely dependent on that external source for our sense of what is true. And then we're very vulnerable. You know, disquieting information may come by. We don't want to look at it because it might threaten that connection. Or we don't want to take a step away to take care of something else because, you know, we may not be able to come back. I mean, it's too fragile. It's too dependent.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know even one of the reasons that I thought, well, gee, faith and Buddhism. I mean, even because it seems, again, brought up Catholic and having gone to Catholic school and read a fair amount of religious stuff over the years, the idea of, you know, there are some that believe that the root of, or the core is faith, and some that believe the core is works, and some that believe the core is grace. Mm-hmm. And it almost seems like, you know, Buddhism would be the one that it doesn't care about faith, because if it's not in the works and it's not in the grace of living, then it's not, you know, it's not worth it, or it's not happening.
Well, you know what I think it comes down to? I once had a dialogue with a psychiatrist in New York City, and we were discussing the nature of the psychotherapeutic relationship and what might be the most healing component of that. And he said that despite technique and strategy and methodology, if you got any good psychiatrist or psychotherapist and you put them up against the wall, is the way he put it, and you ask them, what's the most healing aspect of the relationship, they would say love. And I said, well, I agree with that, of course, you know, but you know those experiences where you just hear these words come blurting out of your mouth sometimes and you think, where did that come from? I heard come blurting out of my mouth. You know, I really agree with what you say about love, but for all we know, the most healing thing about the psychotherapeutic relationship is the fact that someone shows up for their appointment. You know, and that's the faith. It's the faith that gets us out of bed. That
that's
says
the same thing you said about,
different.
For those of you who tuned in late, she said the same thing early in the interview about meditation.
Yeah.
That
that's doing it.
The most important moment in your meditation practice is when you sit down to do it.
That's right. Exactly.
And what's interesting is in both those cases, you're making that a connection to faith. In other words, that you show up.
Yeah.
That you don't put it off today, or that you go to that therapist.
That's right. I mean, I could have stayed in Buffalo, you know, and read books on Buddhism forever and think, well, isn't that great? You know, this man who lived supposedly 2,500 years ago was born a prince, left home, made an investigation into the nature of life, got fully enlightened. Wow, you know. But something in me ignited a movement. So I had to say, what does that mean about me? That's what I think of faith, and actually traditionally it's taught that faith is a verb. It's the offering of our hearts. It means we don't stay on the sidelines and think, wow, that's great, somebody else got enlightened. We move forward. We join up.
Let me ask another. You said faith as a verb to move toward. Is faith also a calling? I mean, in other words, when you sit down or when you went to India, is faith, you say it's a possibility, is it also a calling, that it's faith that pulls you toward your life, your destiny?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is in that sense. You know, it's, I mean, that's the voice of intuition. Yeah. You know, which is a reflection of that deeper sense of calling. And, you know, when I think about the pretense of accident and some of the accidents kind of along the way, you know, it's amazing that I persevered.
Now, one of the things that you connect, and it makes sense, of course, is meditation and prayer and faith, because, you know, your practice has been meditation. What does that have to do with faith? And you say that meditation and prayer have the power to make faith clearer and stronger. Let me ask you two questions. How so? And what is the difference between meditation and prayer?
Well, people use the word prayer in so many different ways. You know, there's petitionary prayer, and there's, you know, I think that the power of prayer is that it allows us to reach beyond the narrow circumstances we find ourselves in to envision a different possibility. You know, it's like if we're confined in a little box and we aim our hearts right outside of that box into a bigger universe. It also like meditation, allows us to let go of our incessant effort to control everything all of the time, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So what people mean by prayer can be a lot of different things, but I think at the heart of it is that.
Let me just say, as you did here with faith, you said, now this is the way it's said, but this is what it means to a lot of people. Right. This is what I think it means.
Yeah.
You could do the same thing with prayer.
Yeah. And I think every time we open up, every time we move forward, every time we recognize that we're moving into the unknown, we're strengthening faith. And that all has to do with meditation and the power of the practice of prayer. When we meditate, we come, as we come right up against the fact that we're not in control of the nature of the mind or the body. You could sit down with the greatest will in the world and say, well, I've thought about it really carefully, and I've weighed all the pros and cons, and I've decided I'm never going to fall asleep when I meditate again, and then 20 minutes later, your head could be down, you could be completely zonked. And the nature of life itself is that it's made up of conditions coming together in certain configurations, certain forms at certain moments, and then they dissolve and things change. And so when the conditions arise for one to fall asleep, you're going to fall asleep no matter what you've decided. Which doesn't mean we're passive, or there's nothing we can do, but that idea of being kind of absolutely, utterly in control so that we can decide, we can determine. It's just not the truth of things. And so the more we struggle to have it be so, the more we suffer. When we can recognize we're going into the unknown and go, then that's faith. Mm-hmm. It's faith with wisdom.
Mm-hmm. So these are subtle terms, because belief... Mm-hmm. And belief, which I think a lot of people associate with faith, mm-hmm. Belief might be that if I have certain beliefs, I do have a sense of control. Mm-hmm. And what you're saying is that faith is not really about That's belief, right. And that it's not about control, it's about possibility. So you That's show right. up in the face of knowing you don't have control.
That's
and
right.
that's an act of faith.
That's right. Boy, it sounds hard.
It does.
But powerful.
You're listening to Free Forum. I'm Terry McNally, speaking with Sharon Salzberg, author of Loving Kindness, and the book we're talking about now, Faith, Trusting Your Own Deepest Experience. You can learn more at www.loving-kindness.org. Let me ask you about a couple of the things you say faith can do. Mm-hmm. You say we can be free of our daily circumstances. Okay? With faith, we can be free of our daily circumstances. I have two questions. One, how? And two, is that denial? In other words, if we are free of our daily circumstances, aren't there a lot of people that do that in a lot of ways so that they don't have to be in their life? Mm-hmm. And how is this different?
Yeah, well, and people do that in a lot of ways. And I did that in a lot of ways, certainly. I was quite good at that. But I think if we can hold a sense of faith with wisdom, faith is intelligent, it's liberating, it's seeing things clearly and yet not being confined. It's not the discarding of our circumstances, trying to pretend that things will necessarily work out the way we want them to. Another distinction that can be made, as you did between faith and belief, is between faith and hope. Certainly in the Buddhist tradition, and Buddhism is very precise about language, so that's some of where this is coming from. The kind of hope that they're talking about is really a fixated hope. It's like attachment, like, well, things are bad today, but tomorrow they're going to be great. I know it. We don't know that, in fact. Tomorrow they might be worse. But something in us we can have confidence in, and that is our ability to be aware, our ability to love. We can have faith, we can have confidence in the nature of the truth of things, that we are connected. We're all connected, no matter what, no matter how alone we feel, no matter how ripped apart from the thread of society, of life we feel, we're not. We can hold conviction in those wisdoms. We can have faith in those wisdoms. And so it's not denial. It's not saying, well, tomorrow, when I wake up, I will have won the lottery, necessarily. And, then this is going to happen and that's going to happen. Well, may it be so, that would be great, but maybe it's not going to happen.
Let me be more specific again of your distinction between faith and hope. In other words, faith is, hope is, because I didn't quite, okay. I didn't hold it as you said it.
Okay, hope in the particular sense that I'm using it, which we call like fixated hope, is attachment. It's a decision like things are going to be the way I want them to be.
Oh, okay.
They've got to be the way I want them to be. Whereas faith is resting in the truth that we don't know that. We don't know how things are going to be.
And yet we.
And yet we have the strength, we have the inner strength, we have the ability to continue to move forward, to remain connected to others rather than isolated.
I just want to play with this again a little bit.
Sure.
I'm in my own life, as I hold things, I believe hope is essential.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, as you described it there, fixated hope, it sounded like,
Yeah.
like a trap, sort of,
Yeah.
rather than an essential.
Yeah.
So what's the hope that makes me feel so, that I feel is so important?
Yeah. No, I think hope is it's always having a sense of possibility, and it is essential. You know, the opposite of what I'm talking about. You know, I'm not promoting hopelessness.
Right.
By any means. You know, that's why it's tricky with the language.
Yeah.
But,
I think I just figured out something, which is when you said faith is a verb, hope may not be as much a verb. Mm-hmm. So
That's true.
hope
is a thing.
Hope springs eternal. Hope that, you know, with a sense of hope you can go forward. Faith is a little more verb than that. It's
Verby.
more action oriented. Yeah. It's like faith is the will, the action that hope allows you to take.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's
and
right.
if there's a subtle distinction between trust, what is it? You said before you chose faith rather than trust because it'd be more provocative, maybe. But what do you think if there's a subtle difference there?
I think the subtle difference would be trust is something that we trust that the sun will rise because it did yesterday. You know, it's something that is more provable. Faith really brings us to the edge of the unknown.
Okay.
And we go forward anyway.
We're getting close to the end, basically a couple of minutes. The thing that I started out the show with saying, you know, wait, why should we have faith? You know, look where it's gotten us. You know, I'm sure you've encountered a lot of people over the last year or so that have asked that question. What do you say?
I mean, I would say look where the lack of faith has gotten us. You know, look where feeling separate has gotten us. Look at where not showing up has gotten us, you know, not recognizing the intrinsic connection that is the truth of things. I mean, look where it's gotten us.
Yeah.
You know, that people, that ancient animosities are just going round and round and round and round, it seems without ceasing, that people will betray the trust that others have, held in them. So callously that...
And they were talking not just about terrorists, but about CEOs.
Yeah, about CEOs, definitely CEOs.
Yeah.
You know, and that we hurt each other and
take advantage of each other and abuse each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's time for faith. You know, it's time for a whole other meaning of faith, a whole other sense of faith.
In that way that it's a verb. That faith would call us to ask more of ourselves to ask more of our leaders.
That's
and
right,
so on.
because it's possible.
Right. If there were nothing better possible, then you self-medicate and go on.
That's right.
and hope that greed serves you as much as it did them.
Yes.
But if there is faith and if there is possibility, then act and show up and demand more.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Well, Sharon, thank you so much. This hour flew by.
Well, it was great to be here. It was great to see you.
Yeah. And thank you to Ian Johnston, my engineer, and to you, my listeners. You've been listening to Free Forum with Terry McNally, and my guest has been Sharon Salzberg. Her new book is Faith, Trusting Your Own Deepest Experience. Her website is www.loving-kindness.org. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, listeners.